All right, so I think we'll get started. So hello everyone, and welcome to week 3 of AMPLIFY. So please consider donating. So on the screen is the link to our Give Butter. We have some great nonprofits that we are fundraising for, so please consider donating. So just a little quick introduction. AMPLIFY is a 10-week virtual speaker series dedicated to sharing stories of Black entrepreneurs, executives, and investors. So please consider joining us each week by signing up for our newsletter, which will be in a link in the chat. So my name is Gianna Bartko. I'm the Vice President of Fordham's Entrepreneurship Society. With us here today is Sharayu, Gerald, and Justice, and they're all helping us co-host the event. So over to Sharayu.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure, and thank you to our panelists, Travis and Alex. So off to you, Justice.
Hello, thank you everyone for attending. I'm Justice. I'm the president of A&T's Aggie Student Entrepreneurship Club, and I hope you guys get a lot out of this.
Hi everyone, my name is Gerald de la Cruz. I am the marketing coordinator for ASEC, which is the Black Student Alliance at Fordham University.
Awesome, thanks guys. So to get started, just a quick introduction of our two, of Alex and Travis. So Travis is the founder and CEO of Holler.io, recently named one of Fast Company's most innovative companies of 2020. A pioneer in his field, Travis was listed in Entrepreneur Magazine's 2018 Most Daring Entrepreneurs list for his work in branding consumer conversations. In 2016, at the age of 23, Travis was named Forbes 30 Under 30 for discovering a data-driven marketing method that provides greater emotional expression in today's digital conversations. He is a regular public speaker with recent appearances at Cannes Lions, CES, Social Media Week, Advertising Week, SXSW, Harvard Business School, among others. Recent profiles of Travis and his company Holler have appeared in publications like Entrepreneur, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, TechCrunch, and The New Yorker. Travis is an inaugural member of the University of Miami's Marketing Advisory Board. Also we have with us is Alex Batdorf, who will be guiding the conversation today. Alex is a 3X entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Get Shit Done, the superpower scaling sidekick for female entrepreneurs building $1 million plus companies. Before founding Get Shit Done, she was co-founder and CMO of ZipFit Denim, a venture-backed e-commerce company that was acquired in 2019. She's been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and has spoken around the nation at Harvard, Turner Broadcasting, and many more. Please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section below to ask Alex or Travis. Thank you both so much for being here, and let's get started with the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So I'll kick it off here. We'll just dive right in because I think given the current state of affairs, which for Travis and I, this is not very new, and some of our amazing teammates on the call, what it means to struggle in America when you don't look like mainstream. So in terms of your position, Travis, as a Black man, walk us through what have been some of your personal experiences and struggles of becoming a leader, especially a leader at such a young age?
Yeah. So, I think in order to answer that question, I'd have to take it back a little bit and just kind of explain what in today's entrepreneurship environment, how you're expected to succeed, right? And so, especially in fields like tech or others, and not just tech, but kind of looking at it more broadly, you're expected to raise a friends and family round of several $100,000s from close friends to get started. And you're supposed to have the best team ever in order to advance your objectives or your business. And ultimately, that's how you get the opportunity to be able to connect with some of the marquee investors and advisors who are able to help you grow your business. Now, the problem with that is, like, if I looked around, I grew up in South Florida, And looking around the table, I couldn't find $100, $200, $300,000 to get started to tinker with an idea. That wasn't something that's realistic. And, you know, with respect to having, you know, access to other tech advisors and things like that in that environment, those are few and far in between. And so the question is if the path to entrepreneurship and the path to starting up a business requires these things from the beginning, you're immediately put at a disadvantage because of how the system works today, right? And so that you know, that kind of lies the struggle of how do you break through and get yourself into a position where you're able to accelerate as a business, accelerate as an entrepreneur, get access to the appropriate capital, and also get access to the knowledge base that is required to build really big and stellar companies. So that was a challenge. And, you know, it took a while. So, you know, I started the business years before I actually got funding. And it took me several years, from 2011 to the end of 2013, where I finally was able to, you know, raise the capital and start to bring on people that allowed me to advance the business. But in a world where that's a quick upstart for people, right? Because you know, they know people, they have people in their immediate network that could offer them those types of resources. It did not, right? And so we have to acknowledge that, you know, some of the struggle that people of color come against is not even like directly or conscious and intentional. It's just systemically how things are structured today, why it makes it challenging. And so what do you do in that situation? So it took me 2 years of kind of going around asking questions. I studied at the University of Miami. I studied at the University of Miami and was really active on campus. And I used that as an opportunity, given that, you know, I was being exposed to so many different people that I was not able to be exposed to before. So I leveraged the campus resources, everything from the Entrepreneurship Center to just really connecting with professors. People forget professors are also very connected because a lot of times they come from different fields. And, you know, I started to build, you know, relationships and a reputation for being hungry on campus. And then, you know, as I was doing that build up while the onset was slower, right? And trying to, you know, get access to these types of resources, what I found, you know, coming into my senior year, that I was able to start capitalizing on the networks that I've been able to develop during my time at the University of Miami, which ultimately led me to raise my first $300,000 and then begin to build out a team that was building off of that as well. So to kind of like take it a high level, like what are the struggles? It's like you're fighting the system, right? It's like in certain environments, you're jumping in, like if this was a river, right? And like starting a company and building a company as a river, you know, if you're from a certain background, it could often feels like it's like kind of you could jump in and swim downstream, right? But when you're coming across, when you're looking to compete for the same resources and the same things without the kind of same environment, it feels more like swimming upstream. And you know, you ultimately make it there, but you have to be a very strong swimmer.
Yeah,
it's kind of the analogy to make.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, because I think it's very easy for founders like yourself and me. In my experience, I've been building companies for over a decade now. And when I was, let's say, raising capital, I started pitching investors when I was 19. And, you know, I remember when I raised capital in my last company and we scaled, you know, we raised a few million, we, you know, scaled to the multi-millions. It became, you are now the voice of, you know, other people that look like you. Yeah. And it's like, that's not the case, because I think something that you're kind of putting in really great context here is that context matters a lot. So for example, you know, you're saying it's about the network, right? like I didn't come from money, you know, I didn't come from poverty, but my family, friends and family was not an option for me. They gave me a hug and said, good luck, you know? But to be fair, as soon as I got into one of the top schools in the world, that gave me access to a network that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And that gave validation, the stamp of validation on my forehead to, let's say, people that could deploy capital as quote unquote, you are now good enough, right?
Yeah.
So I now that kind of leads me into what I think of in the startup space, or what you think is the issue. What are we getting wrong in the entrepreneurial ecosystem when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and equity? I think we leave that out a lot. Because if you look at, let's say, things like something that stood out to me a lot was Andreessen Horowitz recently did their like $2.5 million fund for founders. But we put things in the context around founders of color when it comes to like, we're charitable kind of thing. Yeah. We're actually just opportunities, but we just don't have the networks that, yeah, you know, maybe some of our counterparts that don't look like us have. So what do you feel we're getting wrong in this space when it comes to looking at diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Yeah, so you kind of look at how a lot of transactions happen, right? So if you look at the numbers, less than 1% of all VC capital goes to Black founders, right? So that's like a kind of startling number, right? And, you know, I've been talking to some of the top, you know, these days I'm connected with a lot of top tier VCs and talking through this particular issue in the space. I think one of the things that within the bubble, the VC kind of community is very small, and a lot of these things come from referrals, right? And like, you know, a lot of VCs tend to not even take or look at information that does not come from one of their close contacts. And so in order to start getting yourself into that swim lane, you know, you have to figure out how to break into that. And it's the barriers to doing that are very high. The walls to doing that are very high. And so the question becomes, how do you evolve what your recruitment and deal flow strategy, right? How do you get deal flow from more broad places other than your network directly, and in places that you might have not considered before, right? Good ideas don't only come from the Valley. They come from all sorts of places, right? And there are VC funds that are focused on this. Some of the more forward-thinking funds are thinking about how to think about more of distributed innovation and innovation coming from places other than the city centers. But, you know, it really starts with having to fix kind of the club that is VC today, and ensuring that people are looking at changing the mindset from the inside, that they should be looking from in other places. Now, a lot of these, and to your point, there's a lot of really noble initiatives, right? You see Andreessen Horowitz created a $20 million fund focused at, persons of color. You've seen SoftBank do the $100 million opportunity fund. But then when you look at that, SoftBank's fund is $100 billion, right? Like, so again, when you look at what the efforts that are being made there, and it connects to my program, my problem with diversity inclusion programs in corporate America in general. These are bolt-on initiatives that are feel like they're check the box versus long-term systemic programs that change the fundamental mindset of how organizations are behaving, and therefore drives more scalable change, right? $100 million out of a $100 billion fund is not really moving the needle. It's like it's a
Holler.
Right? Not even a speeding ticket. It's like a candy bar, right? So it's that's some of the conversations that need to be had with a lot of the firms, both on, and there's multiple areas. There's with the investment community and in corporate America, right? Not only like where capital goes and how corporations treat corporate diversity as well. It can't be a bolt-on.
Yeah, and I think this goes a lot back down to mindset of how we're perceiving underestimated people, whether it's employees at a company or founders, and how we think of deploying capital. Because like you mentioned earlier about our networks, right? Like I wasn't able to raise capital unless I had that network there. And I would say, like, have you heard of like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. So like basically I could probably tie back like 6 degrees in some way when I think of when I raise capital, it went back to University of Chicago in some way. Like it always went back where it was a friend of a friend, or it was of a professor or of another investor, but they just happened to be business school buddies. Like there was degrees of separation. And I think on the side of capital, because I think also when we think of entrepreneurship, the one thing I like to caution founders is that it's a very, very small community of people that will ever raise capital. And it's not just a woman versus man thing. It's like 0.004% of people raise capital. But of those who actually do it, there has to be work on the side of how we perceive founders and getting in touch. Like I've heard many VCs say that they won't take cold outreach, right? But it's also like, but if they don't have any type of contact, a lot of times that, like, let's say if you go to state school, you might have 4 to 5 degrees of separation away from that person. So the warm outreach is almost nearly impossible. So I guess that leads me to my next question for you, which is, how are you walking the talk as a leader, especially as an underestimated leader and founder, to make sure that you are not perpetuating the same patterns that we're seeing in our space?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've tried to do, so when we think about marginalization, so like it wasn't like I grew up in a very diverse school, like upbringing. Wasn't from poverty as well. And so I was born with the mindset that diversity is good. Coming from South Florida, like has everything. We have everything in South Florida. And so like, it's like, okay. And when you look at that, fact, like as human beings, we love diversity in every aspect, in many aspects of our life, right? When we think about food, right? We love to try food from all over the world. We love when we go to places, we like to experience local, right? And so it's like, how do we just continue some of these kind of mindsets into other places that we're doing with other places, whether it's corporate America, how we build our networks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I've worked very hard to diminish a label. And so like when when I built my networks and reputation, I didn't want to build a reputation that said, oh, he's a great Black CEO. I just want to be a great CEO, right? And so one of the things that I recommend anyone is like making sure that it's like, you're not a great female CEO. You're a great CEO, right? And that's point blank, or great founder, or great entrepreneur, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you do that. And then at the same time, how do you ensure that you are exhibiting the behaviors that promote change systemically? And so like most recently, we've been doing a lot at Holler to make sure that we have an opportunity to build our corporate culture in such a way that I would define as next generation. And so how do we make sure that we don't create an environment where we're bolting on diversity inclusion programs to what we do today, but we're making sure that we build a culture that celebrates differentness in its infrastructure. And so there's some classical institutions that are built into corporations today that promote siloing effects. So if you think about employee resource groups, right? These are groups that are formed within corporations to help people cope and support them as they're kind of navigating the corporate environment. The fact that we need employee resource groups is fundamentally wrong. Like, why should a person, if you're a woman or a person of color or any of these different groups, why do you need a group that, if you need a support group to survive in a company, there's something wrong with the culture. And so what we've been doing at Holler is thinking about how do we drive education, celebration, belonging, all of these things at the core of the business in order to create, to normalize diversity in the day-to-day. You know, we've done we have a consistent educational program at Holler where we talk about, 2 weeks ago, we had a town hall for women, and we talked about women in the workplace, driving education about the experiences that women face. Today, actually, in about an hour and a half, I'm hosting another one for Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. So we are talking about that. We bring in speakers, we celebrate, we created new things called holidays where we celebrate we said, you know what, why are these the holidays that we celebrate? Why don't we celebrate why there's swath of holidays at the company, everything from Juneteenth to Diwali, right? And so we're really rethinking how all of these things have come to be and trying to change that. And so with respect to internally, I think as the founder of a business, of my company, I need to make sure that I'm building it we innovate in so many other places and we need to innovate here too. And then more broadly, all of these programs and learnings that we're doing, not everyone is Ben and Jerry's, right? Not everyone is everybody tackles the problem in different ways, and you use the brand that you've developed and the resources that your company has to affect change. One of the things that we believe at Holler is that we exist to foster empathy and understanding between all people online, and that's our why. And so we consistently drive positive narrative and conversation, ultimately with the idea that we will drive more positive interactions and conversations between people. Everything from our products to how we how the company behaves in the real world. And then going beyond that, we look at, being that tech is in our DNA, we are treating this as an open source project, right? So all of the things that we don't believe that the things that we're learning from a diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging perspective internally should be held as trade secrets. And so we're pushing out a lot of information and learnings out there that other business leaders, organizations, et cetera, could use in order to drive broader change, because you might not be at Holler forever. But I want to make sure that if you go somewhere else, you're landing in an environment that treats this important issue with the same level of gravitas as we do at Holler. So for me, that's how I've been tackling it. But other people have really done different things that have also moved the needle as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So when you think about, I think a lot of this comes back to the individual themselves, because we've talked about, how you as a leader have navigated, some obstacles, and then also what we can be thinking of organizations to be doing at a higher level. But what about the individual? Because I'm sure there's people listening in who have started companies or thinking of starting companies who are in the underestimated category. I don't like saying underrepresented, I say underestimated. About how do I get started? Because it feels like so many of these things are out of my control, right? Which they are. So what advice would you have for someone who sees this is such an uphill battle? How do I get access to the right resources? How do I get access to the right networks so then I can become that founder and see my vision through, or become that leader at a Fortune 500 company? What would you say to them?
So, it's there's recognizing that there's such thing as required capabilities, right? When I say required capabilities, in many cases, in order to there's ingredients to making a great cake, right? You need access to great talent, right? You need to surround yourself with great talent internally and externally. you need, in many businesses, not all businesses, but there's businesses that need access to capital. And if you want to do that, if you want to take that route in your business, you know where the capital, you know where the money is, right? Like if these are things that are very much known, and there's swim lanes that they are flowing. And so what your job is going to be as a founder starting is to figure out how do you penetrate and get into these environments, right? And that's based off of today. Like you're gonna have to figure out how do you, what you said you did, you leveraged your University of Chicago network, and that's how you started. I did the same thing with the University of Miami. It was my springboard into getting access to and explicitly telling people what I'm doing, like, this is what I'm building, and don't be afraid to pitch. Like, I probably pitched over 100, like, I don't know, like 100,000. I have like no idea at this point. But like, you got to be very vocal about where you're going, why you're going there, show your passion and zeal for this particular thing that you're building, and recruit, right? Like as a founder, you're always selling. Like it's like the, you know, like you're salesperson number one and you're selling people, right? Yep. Right? Like you're always selling, you're selling people, you're selling investors, you're selling customers, like you're selling to the press and the world. Like you're always pitching the dream. And so your story, the story that you craft has to be inspiring to recruit the talent around you. And so really give a hard thought as to why you're doing what you're doing. Why should anyone care about that thing? And then don't be afraid to kind of like sing it in the morning in the shower, when you walk down the halls, just in case somebody hears it. Like just make sure you're telling that story to enough people and making sure you're breaking out. If you know that you're in an environment that does not have access to those resources that are required, the required capabilities, you need to actively and aggressively figure out how you get there. And once you get there, you notice that the wheels start loosening, right? And things start moving more efficiently, because then one person leads to the next, one person leads to the next, another. And then, you know, fast forward, you know, I feel blessed to have come to where I am today, but that was like a purposeful and aggressive push to get myself into these different environments, which is what I would recommend any founder or person who's trying to get started today.
Yeah. And I think what you hit on is it actually does have a good chunk to do with the founder. Like given the stuff we see in like Entrepreneur Mag, or, you know, how hard it is, especially in our space, we deal specifically with female founders. It's so hard for us. And Like, look, I was a 19-year-old CEO who didn't know jack shit. And I was pitching investors on a vision. It's interesting because now I feel like the more experience you get, the more risk averse you become, because you know a lot of the shit that comes with it. But you know, I have to remind myself, what would 19-year-old Alex do? Yeah. Because I was willing to take those big risks because I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's actually the beauty of being in younger or in college when you're starting, because you don't know. And so I went in there, I'm like, here's the big vision. And that's what people were selling. I didn't have experience. I had internships, like maybe one or two, but really not real world experience. So that's what you're pitching them on. And it has so much to do with the founder. And especially if you are considered underestimated, is that you have to go in there. Like what I grew up hearing is you have to work twice as hard. So it's just like, I'm going to come there prepared, not only with the big vision, but I'm going to have receipts to back it up. I'm going to know that market inside and out. I'm going to do a lot of the research. I'm going to have my projections down. I'm going to have all these different things. So that's such a good point, because you can definitely break through. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. Very hard. But I think there's so much that goes back to the founder, because investors invest in people, people invest in people, even down to your employees. That's why they go and work for a company, period.
I mean, look, at the end, so you that last point is very salient, right? Like it's all people. It's a whole people game of people. I was not a tech person like starting, right? I worked in finance, and before that, I was in management at Chick-fil-A's, right, from a teenage years. Like, was not a tech person, but was inspired and interested in the tech world. And so what did I do? I surrounded myself, was able to recruit, onboard, tell that story that got a lot of tech people from different domains and business people and everywhere from Facebook to NASA to work for us at Holler. And like, you and telling the story, but to your point, having the data and showing that you're prepared is going to be really important, because it's like, you know, one thing is, do I believe the story that this person is telling me, and am I get excited by, and do I believe that this is the right person to do it? And the latter parts of that, what you were saying, which is having the receipts to back it up and knowing your markets and all that type of stuff, it's what makes me believe or gain conviction that you are the right person to do it. So I think, you know, I think we're in alignment on those things, having built before and seen that kind of run up, that there's kind of a recipe to it, and very complex cake, but a cake nonetheless, and it can be baked.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting when I think of like your story, I think of my story, I think of any founder, regardless of what you look like I love listening to like How I Built This on NPR. And when I hear a lot of their stories, it is always about someone opening the door, someone doing this to get them to where they're at. And so that takes me to Allyship, because quite frankly, I could not be where I'm at today if I didn't have allies in the form of mentors, peer mentors, sponsors, so on and so forth, that are the people that are in rooms, like literally singing my praises without me knowing it. And these people were integral. Like, even when it comes to early on when I started, I would say the majority of my mentors were actually men, because they were the ones in these powerful positions that were able to go and ask their buddy, hey, write a check for this founder. And so I want to bring this up because I think that we also forget people, whether it's our classmates, whether it is teachers who are like, this is a problem, but what can I do? Can you explain how allyship, whether it's in the form of mentorship, sponsorship, so on and so forth, has played a huge role in where you're at today? And then also, what did that transpire into? Do you have any like specific examples?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, one of our investors, he's the founder of Shea Moisture, and you know, he's the owner of Essence. And then there was another gentleman he was at Columbia Records, Mark Echo, et cetera. He's been in the sports entertainment world. And I brought him on for a conversation at the onset of the Black Lives, at this round of the Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd, to talk about the times. And one of the things that, you know, was brought up was, they're like, you know, I appreciate allyship, but I'm looking for comrades, right? And it was a very interesting concept. And I actually wrote about it in an article that got posted in Fast Company today, about this notion of looking for comrades. And so kind of the thesis there was that allies, like, think about like the allies of the United States, right? Well, when you're going on a mission, they're like, we're not against you, but like, you know,
But we're not really showing up either.
we're not really showing up either, right? So
like, we're over here, we're not going to interfere, but do you?
Yeah, right. So like, that's, you know, that's allyship. And but with a comrade, it's people who are really going to go to bat for you, right? Like, you're people who are going to help you, promote you, like they're going to actually talk about you when you're not in the room in ways that are positive and helpful to your brand and objectives. Like, those are the comrades, right? That are people who are like really into it. And so it's like, how do you surround yourself with as many comrades to go to battle with you in this particular world? I have one specific example of a gentleman named Oliver Livy. He ended up leading my Series A. Was invested multiple times with Holler, and you know, I was at the Clinton Global Initiative, speaking with Blackstone, on global youth on entrepreneurship when I was still in college. And at the time, the president of the University of Miami was Donna Shalala, and she was in the crowd. So she introduced me, see, still back to the University of Miami network, but she introduced me to this gentleman who was an ambassador here in New York, and him and I just formed a really stellar relationship. And so at the time I was still starting the company in Florida. He was based in New York. He invited me to a gala in New York for one of his charities, which I went. And I met so many people in that experience, in that span of time, that I was like, you know what, I just gotta be here. And so I left, flew back to Florida, packed up all my stuff and flew back to New York in a week. Like, just was like, you know what, I just know I need to be here. This person is somebody who's looking out for me. I'm just gonna, you know, jump the shark and just go. And so I went. And so within weeks, I was like having meetings with everyone from Facebook to Spotify to all these different places, meeting so many different people. And that was, and like he continued until this day, continues to make a lot of introductions to me, has helped me raise incredible amount of money, make relationships. That those initial introductions spawned on into and really jump-started my New York network and now my global network. And like, it's just like, that's an example of someone who is a comrade, right? Someone who's really backing you, someone who really understands who you are and has a sincere interest in seeing you succeed. And when they're capable, like this gentleman was, it really helped. So I would say look for as many of those situations as you can, because they do make a difference. When people actually care, it does make a really stark difference in what the experience and how people receive you when you're introduced.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So then I think of the time we're in right now. It can feel very scary socially from an economics perspective. I remember when I started my last company, I had entered school in 2008. So we were literally going in the recession. And it was scary because for us, particularly because we were sold, and this is why a lot of millennials are YOLOing it out, because we were sold a dream. We were told, you go get that fancy college degree and you're going to get out and you're going to get that high paying job. It reminds me of Kanye West's College Dropout. He has like skits through it. And it's like, you're going to go get that high paying job. And then it was just like wrong. Like as I was coming into school, there were kids who were ahead of me coming out with this fancy degree from one of the top places, and they were jobless and they had all this debt. And so it was interesting because there was this breed of people. Our graduating class was like literally the catalyst for entrepreneurship at our school, because all of us were like, we were sold a dream and we have 2.5 seconds to figure out what we're going to do next. So a lot of us ended up starting companies, going to Y Combinators, getting funding, being at the White House, and then obviously the economy picked back up. But I think as scary as it can be in these times, there's also so much opportunity. Like I actually, in a weird way, get excited when things like this happen, because it basically brings up to the surface shit that doesn't work and it's forcing us to reckon with, well, what do we do next? So for anyone out there that is thinking of starting a business or who already has, what would you recommend for them to be doing right now to seize the opportunity of the now?
So to your book, crises birth the next wave of companies. So if you do a little history, right, and you look at all the companies that were born out of the .com bubble, right? And you saw a crop of new companies like the Googles of the world that really took off and brought us into the digital age. You know, Facebook started in 2004. However, you didn't really see like a lot, like you saw it start to blow up coming into that financial crisis era. It was another website, MySpace, but when they went to mobile and became so much more, that was when that 2007 kind of 2008 and into the financial crisis era. And then there's been a lot of companies born on the backs of that. Everyone from the Airbnbs, the like continue going from there. So you're starting to see a lot of, you see those waves. Now we're in another moment where this one feels particularly different because it's a mixed bag, right? So in other ones, it was like, okay, a lot of the whole system went down at the same time, but this one is like a mixed bag of winners and losers. And there's companies that were innovative and digitally equipped and forward thinking for the next wave of how consumers behave are booming right now. And then the other ones that were built off of legacy infrastructure and mindsets are dying. This also have created so many opportunities, like all of those weaknesses are being exposed at scale. And so there is so many opportunities to look at the world a little bit differently and say, like, what does a fully digital world look like? And what are the things that like we were teetering on that we probably shouldn't have, we should have moved on, and we should have moved into that direction anyway. That to me just screams opportunity. And so it's all about looking for the white space in these markets. Like there's tons of them, and there's people that are doing. I've seen a lot of interesting and innovative. I'm like, that's clever. And those things are going to be lasting, right? And like, I think there's my CTO, Chief Technology Officer, says this, and I just think it's funny. He says that the most painful place to sit is on top of the fence, right? Like you either go over or like don't.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, I think in the world, historically, we've been sitting a lot of on the fence in a lot of different industries. And, you know, it's the innovations that are coming out of this crop that's going to push people over. And I think that we're going to see a lot of good stuff. So I would say everybody like this is the time to get to work, right? And like really start thinking about what the world is and what it's going to be. And I think the innovation comes from the groups like these people, like the folks on the phone, that will drive some of this innovation going forward.
Yeah, and I think what you point out is really important in terms of, and I want to open it up for Q&A too. But in these moments, like you get to see, specifically when you're in a pandemic and you're sitting still, you see what doesn't work. Like the fact that the restaurant industry is literally on its knees right now. There's so much opportunity, and I highly suggest something that you guys can tangibly look at. It's called 20-Minute VC. There's a specific episode with a VC called Steve Blank. He's huge in the space, and he talks about how in 2008 there was a huge tech wave because tech was starting to become really huge because of the introduction of the iPhone or just smartphones. But now he's saying that that's not necessarily going to be what's going to happen now. Actually said there's going to be a lot of non-tech related things that are going to pop up in this space. So even if you don't have a technical background, Travis said it, I had all of my companies have been tech companies. I am not a technical founder. I can't code worth a damn. There's just opportunity no matter what. And we all look at things differently. So you have such an opportunity to bring your unique lens to it. But I do want to hop into questions here. There's one for you, Travis. It says, what is the role women have played in your growth at Holler?
So one of my top lieutenants at Holler is a woman named Sarah. She's a British woman, phenomenal. She's our chief marketing officer. And I remember when I hired Sarah, our company was completely different, like just completely different company, nothing compared to what it is today. Mm-hmm. We were actually named Emoji prior before we became Holler. Mm-hmm. And I talked to her, like I've met so many different people, so many different from throughout the history. And I was like, you know what, I really need someone to help me bring the company to the next level. She came in and she was like, I explained to her what I was building, what I was trying to do. And her first thing she said in the interview was like, you need a new brand and name. And like, it was like very like, that's like, it's like your baby's ugly, right? Like, it's just like,
True.
like really, but sometimes you need to have that person that's like, I understand where you need to go. This is not it, but like, and really just start talking about that. The only person bold enough to say that to the founder in the interview process. Fast forward a year and a half later, you know, she has taught me things about marketing that I like. She was a global CMO and managing director, built an agency with 14 offices across the world. One of the largest agencies, creative agencies in the UK. And she built that. And like, I've learned so much about brands, building a company, and not only just like marketing the business, but building like how a brand should behave. Like a name is just a name, but how does the brand behave? How do we live to our ethos? She's been like kind of the chief arbiter of like ensuring that we're living to the brand internally and externally. And she's been my partner in crime. And so very powerful partnership that we have, and she's great.
I love that. Another question, Alex, how could men uplift and support women in the business world? Quite frankly, I think we have to stop looking at it as it's a men versus woman thing. When I think of the men in my life who have uplifted me, especially in entrepreneurship, whether it was writing a check, finding people that would write me checks, or just opening doors for me, is that they were not like, I need to help her because she's a woman. They're like, I need to help you because you are badass. So I really think it's more of, if you see someone that you believe in, if you are a male, if you believe in that person, you're like, they're awesome. Something as simple as like just making an introduction, saying, hey, you should talk to this person I know. They might be able to help you. And there's no, if there's anything I've learned, like my superpower as a founder, I don't care to be the smartest person in the room. I don't care about that. I care to be the most connected, because if there's anything I've learned in meaningful connections, if there's anything I've learned about how I've gotten to where I've gotten, it's because of my network and people that said, I believe in what you're doing and I want to be of service because I like how you're serving everyone at large. So I think if we start looking at it as just support people that you think are awesome, even if it's an introduction, you never know where that can lead. Next question here is, how did Travis's Chick-fil-A background help in his growth?
Yeah, so very much so. So I started working at Chick-fil-A's at 15, and I was fortunate enough to get promoted at 15 to my first leadership role as a training lead. And then over the span of 5 years at Chick-fil-A, I got 5 promotions, and at the end of that, I was GM and training director, and at 19, I was managing about 120 employees at the time. And so I was the operator of my Chick-fil-A, like just doubled down his investment to me. It was very personal to him, and I was able to effectively I was getting leadership training and management training and all that at 16 years old. Not only that, he brought me to corporate. And so I started working with corporate very early on as a teenager. Like I was like we had one of the best performing units in South Florida. And I was the training director. And so I worked with corporate on their South Florida expansion. I met the CEO of Chick-fil-A and the family. Even it was crazy. Like when I became a founder myself, I was in France, and he came and had breakfast with me. And we had breakfast, and we shot video series together, and we still stay in contact over text today. And it was a different experience for me, because it felt like there were people that wanted to see me succeed and achieve, and they poured out a lot of investment to make that happen. And so when I walked into college, I probably had some context which caught the eyes of my professors, that they didn't like. I was doing a lot at the age that I was, and I think it's all started with coming in, working really hard every single day, and trying to do a good job and executing it really well, which would say, you know what, you should train everybody. Was like the basic thing, and then it grew from there.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot with a lot of founders I know. We've valued a lot of work experience, because I had I had worked like from the time I was 16, doing different things. And I've learned how to run like a business before I even got to college. So yeah, that's a great point. Someone asked, while in the pre-seed stage, what should entrepreneurs do if they don't have access to capital from family and friends? I'll jump in first on this because I literally just had this conversation. I have it every day. I think a lot of people don't realize, and I can share this in the chat too, where the majority of funding comes from and at what stage for founders. Like I said earlier, it's like 0.004% of founders in general will get access to venture capital. And of that, 2% goes to women. So context matters. If you zoom out, it's not a vehicle for most companies because I don't think a lot of people understand what it means to actually scale and grow at the level of the expectation it means to take on institutional capital. That's the first thing. But if you're getting started, there's a breakdown in this graph that I'll show to you guys, but it's crowdfunding. This was done in 2015, 5 billion. Then you have 20 billion for investors. I think it's like 13 billion for banks, 20 billion for VCs, 20 billion for angels. And then there's this huge 185 billion thing. It like supersedes anything else. It comes from a founder's personal savings and credit. The majority of your funding when you start comes from yourself. And I know Travis had mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that he didn't get funding until a little bit later, because what is required to get funding is you need to have some form of traction. There has to be some form of validation for someone to give you a check and justify this. The only time I've ever seen personally an investor invest in someone without traction is trust fund babies, or it has been founders, and this is more than I've seen it less with trust fund babies. I see it more with founders who've actually exited a company successfully before. That's the main time I've ever seen it. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier about investors invest in people. So the founders of Instacart started a law platform for lawyers that ended up imploding. They raised a couple million, but even though they failed at that, their investors still invested in Instacart, even though they failed the last time. So I think it's okay and what we don't talk enough about is it's okay for you to have that side hustle. It's okay for you to work full-time and then transfer into the actual full role in your business, because that's where most founders are getting their capital. Like if you're like me, I didn't have access to friends and family. That was not an opportunity for me. But I think that we have to get realistic with what it takes to actually get funded. And it goes back to traction, and it takes a bit of time to make that happen. Travis, do you have anything else to?
I would completely agree. Like in that, I started the business in May 2011. I didn't get funded until December 2013, and I was sure enough I was working that whole time, right? So yeah. You're trying to figure out you're trying to you're trying to convince. I was convincing people to work with me and partner with me on a pro bono basis, or working or figuring out how to fund things yourself. But it's what you're trying. If and not all businesses require capital, but if your business does, then it's all about getting to that point where you have enough traction in order for somebody to write you a check, and then it's being very entrepreneurial about how you get there.
Yeah. And let's say if you do need capital, because there are businesses that are capital intensive to start with. Crowdfunding is I really respect crowdfunding because it is market validation. People are saying, I'm willing to give you money. I don't know you because I think this is badass. So I would not sleep on crowdfunding either. If you're like, I do absolutely need the capital to build this, groundbreaking technology, or so on and so forth to get started, that's a great opportunity as well. Next question here is, I have an amazing idea, but don't know what are the next steps to materialize my idea. What would you say, Travis?
So there's the things there's the things you don't know, and the things that you don't know. And so if you have the idea and you like start to figure out like the things that you know that you don't know. Try to figure out. There's like try to reach out to different entities, individuals that you might be able to start to educate you on those things that you know that you don't know. Like for example, I didn't know tech, so I was like, this is a tech platform for starters. I don't know tech, so let me like start to figure out who can I align myself with. Even I started with other students at the university who were in the engineering school, the School of Engineering, and like just started to learn the basics of it and like understand how development works because I had no idea, and that led me to other places. If there's other areas where you don't know what you don't know still, like then I would say leverage resource, and this goes back to access to or getting connected to talent, right? So like for me personally, I took advantage of an organization at the University of Miami called the Launchpad, and alumni of the university, they would come in, they did like Shark Tanks with us. You were hearing from people with legal backgrounds, tech backgrounds, other founders, like other things. And, there's a lot of people that donate their time in a very structured way to help you. Like, both of us are on the phone right now. We're entrepreneurs who are willing to kind of share some ideas and experiences. There's a lot of people who have built companies in different ways, or people who are just in corporate America that have experience. They don't have to be founders and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of business people or engineers or marketers, like all these different people who are willing to spend some time with you. Also, professors, those are places like I got.
Yeah.
They were working individuals in different points in life, especially like, I know in our business school, we had a lot of people who were that. And so, I do recommend taking advantage of all of these different types of individuals when you can. And all of it is about data collection, right? Like if you don't know something or you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And then like things will unravel, more ideas will come as you keep going. But like anytime some upcoming founder says, hey, how do I get started? I say start. And like make mistakes, do stuff, learn things, and that will start getting you in the direction. But it's not gonna just fall out of the air and like, okay, it's all mapped out. Like even till this day, I have to make decisions where I don't know everything. And we have to just start and figure it out along the way.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I started my first company. I was 19 and again, leveraging professors, Bob Rosenberg, amazing entrepreneur professor at University of Chicago. And I remember going to him with my idea. I had done some of the work. I had gotten the team together. We started working on the product and I was so secretive about it. And we've seen like Social Network, like the movie, and like people stealing ideas. And I remember I was afraid of that because I had just seen that movie, like someone's going to steal my idea. And I'll never forget, Bob told me, he was just like, Alex, the reality is most people are lazy. They're not going to steal your idea. Most people will not be able to do what you do. And I think it takes me to one of the best lessons that I've ever learned. One of them as an entrepreneur is that ideas are so cheap. Execution is everything. Yes. And this idea of competition, like I actually don't even use the terminology competition. I just say other players, because the reality is when you go down a grocery store aisle, you're selecting from the same stuff. Basically, the ketchup, it's just different packaging, but it's all ketchup. One has more sugar, one has less. That's it. And it's the same thing when you look of opportunities in this space. There's room for multiple tech companies, healthcare. It's about how you're actually doing it. So when it comes to actually getting started, the beauty in it is learning if there's actually a need and a demand in the market. So I just spent time, researching the space, saying, okay, this seems cool. But then I started talking to people that would be our ideal, or what we thought at the time, our ideal user, to hear from them what they thought about it, but also what they would need. So that helped to develop the product. We developed the product alongside our customer, because the worst thing I've seen entrepreneurs do all the time, they're like, I just developed this like groundbreaking technology and tinkered around and especially engineers. I'm just like, cool, who have you talked to about it? They're just like, oh, and I'm like, that's great. You have all the bells and whistles, but you don't even know if anybody wants to use those bells and whistles. So go talk to people. So if you're not technical, and actually if you are technical, please go talk to people. Just talk to them about it to validate if this is something people actually want or are willing to invest in. And then you learn a lot from that too. Like what could be a different iteration, because you could learn what might not exist that people are dying to have. And then we have a little bit of, we're at 11 already, but final question is, are there any regrets that you guys have from when you were 18 to 19 years old? So Travis, when did you start this company?
When I was 19.
When you were 19? Yeah, same. Any regrets?
Any regrets? It's a good question. You know, I never regret starting this company. Obviously, I love what I'm doing. I think, have there been disappointments? Like there's been a ton of disappointments, but as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate like a lot of the older disappointments because they've taught me something different and something that stayed with me for the long haul, that I continue to use today. Any regrets specifically? If anything, it's like I used to be slower to like push things out and try them, right? And so like I think the iteration curve of when I was doing like that could have been tightened, right? So that the 2+ years probably didn't have to be 2+ years until I got really moving. I would have encouraged myself back then to iterate more. And then also, if I was giving advice to my old self about things, I would just say like, don't worry, right? Like it's gonna like, I used to stress everything, like everything. And I would just been like, listen, and now as I've gotten more and less, I'm like, oh, it'll be okay. Like something like really like, 3 million users go down in Indonesia. I'm like, oh, well, we learned, right? Like,
you figured it out, okay, whatever.
Right. And like, I used to like, if I had the same mentality back then as I had now, I'd probably have a heart attack. So,
yeah,
I think just kind of remember, keep going at it. It all works out. And that's something I did not do back then, but I certainly adopted now.
Yeah, same. I'm already a perfectionist by nature. And so like, I've always been super hyper competitive, hyper achiever. And when you're in the early stages of starting something, it is so messy. There's no perfect silver bullet to anything. You're figuring things out along the way. And I think it's giving yourself grace. I don't know if I necessarily regret that. If I could say, if I wish I would have known something, was that my age was actually my superpower. Because I used to be so hard on myself, feeling like I had to prove myself more because I'm like, I don't have this experience, I don't have this, but it was just like, actually, you're willing to take risks that most people aren't able to. Also, context, I didn't have any responsibilities. And also you have a vision that no one else has, and you're willing to step out on a ledge and take the leap to make it happen. There's plenty of people that will not be able to see something the way you do it. And that is your superpower. And the fact that you don't know what you don't know is actually one of the best gifts that, as I'm getting older, like scaling companies, I'm just like, like I said, I check in, what would 19-year-old Alex do all the time? Because I freak myself out. I'm like, oh God, I know we could go down this rabbit hole. Like, experience is great and the knowledge is great, but sometimes it can prevent you from taking those risks that are actually essential in innovation. So I wouldn't say I regret any of it because it led me to here. But I wish I had known that at that age, it was actually my superpower. Yeah, I know that we're a little over time here. So for Gianna and Justice and Gerald, and how would you guys like to move forward here?
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for coming. Everybody, thanks for joining. And this is a really interesting conversation. So the links, I think, are still in the chat for the Give Butter or the newsletter if you want to sign up. And yeah, so thank you guys so much. I think.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Let's see.